Okay, well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. We're going through again 6.3, and we're going through trial and error, and I'm going to spend a couple more minutes doing a couple more examples of trial and error, especially because it's going to be important, I think, to be able to kind of be fluent, I guess, or real comfortable with trying to factor polynomials when we're given polynomials in the form ax squared plus bx plus c. So in other words, if we're given something like that, it's probably going to be a good idea to be able to kind of check out how to factor it without going through the longer method that we'll see in 6.4. So I want to give us some examples. So I'm going to go to our smartboard. So we've done this already. 6.3. We've seen this already. And if we're given something like this, ax squared plus bx plus c, we have to start with our factorization there. Page 2 right here gives us all of our recommendations. So hopefully you've gotten that printed out, or at least memorized maybe, and that's probably going to be a good idea to memorize that. As we go through, we've gone through a couple of examples, and we're going to go back to one that we kind of started with, or a page, I guess, that we started with. And I'm going to say, let's go here and say, let's now work on this example over here, the one on the top right. 10x squared minus 9x minus 1, because it's going to give us just some opportunities to kind of go through all of our steps. So let's see. Remember, there were 3 steps to making our life easy. Step number 1 was making sure it's the polynomials in descending order. We've got an x squared term, then an x to the first power, and an x to the 0th power. So there, it's in descending order. Number 2 is factor out any greatest common factor from all the terms. There's no greatest common factor with all these because this is a 1. There's really nothing in that term of 1, except for 1, and it's not worthwhile to factor anything out like a 1, because that's the only thing that can come out of here. The third thing to do would be to factor out a negative 1 if our a term, because this is a, this is b, this is c, a is 10, b is negative 9, c is negative 1. If a were negative, we would factor out a negative 1. But there's no negative sign here, so the next step then is to factor out, or I guess go to our next step, which would be to kind of set up our little skeleton of our factors. And remember, these things in black are factors. The factors multiply together to get our product here. So in chapter 5, we went from here in the black to the blue. In chapter 6 that we're in right now, we're going from the blue and factoring back to the black. So what should we do? Let's see. We've set up our skeleton here, I guess. So what we do now is to say, let's assign a sign. Let's just determine what the signs are. If this were positive, we would say that these would both be the same. In other words, if there's a sum here, the signs would be the same. But there's a difference here, so one has to be positive, one has to be negative. So we can probably leave it blank as, you know, which one's positive, which one's a negative. If you want to, you can put in a positive here and a negative here. But we're essentially going to be working with now factoring, because this is step number, I think, 3. Let's go back to our steps. We've done the signs, step number 3. Step number 4 is factor out a into these numbers here, and factor c into these green parts here. So now we just have to go through and say, what's our factorization of a? A factorization would go here. What's our factorization of c? Our c term, or factors, go here and here. So this is kind of you can kind of take a shortcut by saying, you know what, I know that 1 factors to 1 and 1. One's going to be positive, one's going to be negative, so you just put a 1 here and a 1 there. Here's a positive 1 times a negative 1. These two multiply together to give us our product of c. So just a reminder that what we're trying to do is make sure that we get factor pairs of a and a in the green and c in the red, so that the factor pairs of the inside terms multiplied together and the outside terms multiplied together add up to this middle term here. So now we've got to figure out what goes where. This should be able to jump out at us. Sometimes it jumps out at us. Our factorization of 10 would be 1 and 10, 2 and 5, and 5 and 2, and 10 and 1. And now we've got to say what goes in there to add up to negative 9. If I put it, because right now it jumps out at me that 10 minus 1 gives me 9. So if I put a 10 in here and a 1 in here, that would give me a negative 10x and a positive 1x. Those should add up to a negative 9. So there's one that might jump out at you. There's a 10, there's a 1. Now let's assume that that's correct. I guess our short check would be to say what's our inside term multiplied together, added up to with our outside term multiplied together. Inside term would be 1 times 1x gives us 1x, positive 1x, positive times a positive gives us a positive. The outside terms multiplied together are 10x times negative 1, which gives us negative 10x, and that adds up to negative 9x. And in fact, that is what we're looking for right there, because we need to match that there. So now what we should do is probably just FOIL, just to make sure that our multiplication is correct, or that our factorization is correct. I'm assuming that this is our factorization, so let's assume. And then if we do, we have to just FOIL to double check our work. FOIL to double check our work. So let's try that out. First terms are 10x times 1x gives us 10x squared. Outside terms are 10x times negative 1 is negative 10x. Inside terms, 1 times 1x is positive 1x, or adding 1x. Last terms are positive 1 times negative 1 gives us a negative 1. And now we combine the like terms that are here, and we say 10x squared plus 10x minus 1x gives me minus 9x. Minus 1 is what we FOILed from our from our factors. We've got these factors together that we think is the answer. We FOILed it out, and now what would these multiply together to get? 10x squared, minus 9x, minus 1. Sure enough, it checks out. So there, we've double checked our work, and there is our answer. So we've started with a trinomial, and we've factored out using our number one step-by-step process, but also number two, using kind of intuition to say, well, you know what, this 1 factors to 1 and 1. That's maybe my shortcut. And then we only have to deal with the 10, factoring the 10 and 1. Could have been 5 and 2, but you know what, we started with 10 and 1 because it kind of jumped out at us. So there's our answer for something that includes negatives and a prime number and something we have to factor.